I am a he. I'm a hombre. Hombre. Bon dia and muchas obrigado for inviting us here. Sorry, I know. Too chaotic. um, I prepared this. Mucho bon dia a todas e a todos. Antes de começar, quero agradecer a aliança e a inclusão pelo convite. É uma grande alegria e uma grande honra estar aqui em Maputo. Obrigada pela vossa hospitalidade. Kanimambo. Kanimambo. I had to try this. I really had to try this. Not only because, I think I can see a future with the Portuguese speaker, but, I'm a neighbor. I'm from Eswatini. Kanimambo again, and thank you very much for having us here. I'm Melusi Simelane, of course, has been introduced. I lead the civil and political rights in the Southern Africa Litigation Center. But I must say that I'm also wearing a second hat, as I am the founder and current board chairperson of Eswatini Sexual and Gender Minorities, which is in the Kingdom of Eswatini. I've been asked to address a question of how laws open and close economic doors. And I think for me, this question is not abstract, as it has been the life that I have led and continue to lead, as I will share with you today. And the question of these public policies that shape LGBTQ people's access to economic opportunities and social protection. And my answer must begin with one idea. The law is the gatekeeper of the economy. The law is actually what makes it problematic for us to access all of these economic opportunities that we seek to achieve. And what do I mean by this? What I mean is that for an individual to get a formal job, for an individual to start a business, for an individual to access social grants, for an individual to access healthcare services, you have to go through the hurdle of criminalization. And mind you, these are colonial inheritances. And I think you guys have it better here in Mozambique because you've already done away with these colonial era laws. But what we find is that these laws, they unrecognize you as you are trying to find yourself. And I think for an organization, it's the question of registration. And I will speak briefly about this as well, where you are denied to open a bank account. You are denied to literally employ staff and receive funding and do all of these necessary things that are necessary for you to operate as a business because you are refused registration. And I think recognition first, protection second, everything else flows from that. As I often say, the real foreign import to Africa has never been our existence. And we hear a lot about the narrative that, oh, these queer rights are a Western influence. But no, we never inherited that. We never imported that. The only thing that we imported from our colonial masters are these laws that criminalize us, are these laws that continue to make our livelihoods even more harder. And right now, these laws have a huge funding potential. These anti-rights movements that most of the speakers today have spoken about, they're being funded hugely by organizations that have got a lot of money. So, where am I? So let me get practical in terms of what is happening in the region, in the closing of civic space, and tell you about this playbook that all of our governments, all of these private donors, and all of these evangelicals from either the United States, or it's the Russian Orthodox Church, or it's the Islamic movement that is trying to do away with our rights, which is what is contributing to the rise in authoritarianism. They are following a very simple basic rule book. And step one, it is criminalizing the human. It is criminalizing the conduct of the human. It is criminalizing what it means to be who you are. these sodomy laws, and again, I've spoken about the fact that Mozambique has done away with this, but it's continuing in other countries all over the continent. And we're seeing in Niger, for instance, we're seeing in Burkina Faso, they are reintroducing these laws. We are seeing in Ghana where there is this move to reintroduce these laws. And then the second thing, it is the refusal to register our organizations, which again, I will speak about Eswatini, Malawi, and even here in Mozambique. And then the third step, and we do not often talk about this very much, it's the fact that we are forced to self-censor. We are forced to lie about who we are just to be registered, to be able to access bank accounts. So as an example, you will be forced as an organization to change your objects. You will be forced as an organization to change the name. And we've seen this in Kenya, where the NGO board refused even the name containing the words gay and lesbian. And think about this. Think about a state forcing you to lie about who you are. And this is part of the playbook that is being played out. And of course, we're happy that in Kenya, because of the fight that played out in courts, the Supreme Court reversed that and said you cannot deny an organization registration just because it has a name that you feel some type of way with it. And the fourth sort of step that this playbook contains is the legislation against civil society itself. We're seeing a rise in these NGO bills. We're seeing a rise in these laws that look at foreign agents, these sovereignty laws, and these cybercrime laws. And there's a lot of them that are coming in. And what I have actually noticed as I'm doing my work at the SALC is that all of these new laws are coming in cloaked in a colonial era language. And this colonial era language is that language of sedition, is that language of offense and disaffection to the leader. And if you think about seditious laws, the concept and the essence of it, they come from a colonial time when the kings of England would not want to hear all of these people from the colonies talking back to them as the colonizers. And then they created these seditious laws. We've been successful in Africa to turn the tide in terms of reversing these seditious laws because they are colonial. But what we're seeing now is that they're being reintroduced, cloaked in NGO laws, cloaked in sovereignty laws, cloaked in all of these cybercrime laws, which are, by the way, being passed through our parliament at the speed of light without allowing a due process, without allowing us to talk about them. But I mean, we will all debate about these issues. And I think the fifth step in terms of this playbook is when everything else fails. And we're living in the digital era. When I walked into this room, I was surprised, this big screen. We don't have this in Eswatini, you know. We're a very small rural country. But this speaks to the digital innovation that we're seeing, and governments are catching up. Governments are switching off the internet at a whim. Governments are targeting us as civil society actors. Governments are shutting down social media platforms, and we've seen this in Tanzania recently with the shutting down of Twitter, which, by the way, we are fighting in court. But we've seen it almost everywhere in Africa, where the government will see where are the LGBT activists mostly congregated. Are they on Facebook? Let's shut down Facebook. Are they on X? Are they in TikTok? Let's shut down that. Or they will start surveilling and then shutting down the entire spectrum, which is collective punishment by definition, really. And this playbook, you know, it has a price. It has a price to pay. And this price, unfortunately, is often paid for by us who are on the margins. And the discrimination costs in East African economies, and about 4 countries in East Africa, if you look at World Bank data, it speaks to about $5 billion that is being lost because of discriminatory laws. It talks about over $5 billion being lost because they are not allowing those who are in the margins to actively participate in these economies. If you look at Uganda alone, they have said that 2.4 billion since the Anti-Homosexuality Act has been frozen in World Bank funding. Now look at this amount of money that could have gone into building the economy of the country. But because of these discriminatory laws, our countries are losing out on this. And if you look at the sub-Saharan Africa, it has lost over 1.6 billion due to internet shutdowns. Now, in Tanzania's election in 2025, when we also the internet shutdown, the estimation was that around 230 million US dollars was lost in the broader economy just during that short period of an internet shutdown. So you can see how there is a price to pay for all of these actions that are being taken by the state, these policies, these regulations, or these laws, as they continue to call them. So the question in terms of who pays, it's the informal trader selling on the WhatsApp group or Facebook. It's the person locked out of M-Pesa or mobile money because their identity documents do not align with their gender identity. It is the people who lack the young queer person whom the internet community is a safety and an income all at once. And once you shut down that internet, they've run out of a safe space. So we really have spent decades proving we exist. And this conference, it must prove that what our economies lose when we are excluded is actually what they gain when we are included. So basically, all of this money that they're losing, they could gain back if they could just allow us to be who we are. But the same law can be turned around. You know, I do not like being a pontifier or a preacher of all doom and gloom. I do love turning the page and saying there is light at the end of the tunnel. Because these same laws can be used, really, if you notice how each victory answers this playbook step by step. If you look at Botswana, for those of you who know the story of Lekhabibo, it started all the way back in 2012. It was the issue of registration, and then it moved all the way to decriminalization. If you look at the story of Kenya, already I've spoken about the issue of the name issue that was addressed by the Supreme Court there. If you look at Namibia, there is Daniel Dikasho, a good friend of mine, and Anita Sales, who actually went all the way to the Supreme Court to have their marriage, which was actually finalized outside the country, recognized inside Namibia. Yes, the government has tried to bring a new bill to sort of reverse that, but the precedent stands that the courts have interpreted the law broadly, the courts have interpreted the law with the lens of international human rights law, which is mindful of dignity and equality. I mean, of course, I can never forget the issue of Dausab, who has actually pushed the litigation to decriminalize in Namibia. But also in Mozambique, the Constitutional Council ruled in 2017, I believe, that clauses used to block organizations' registrations are unconstitutional. That precedent exists. It is waiting to be enforced. But the question of how do we enforce it? You know, this is not an abstract look. If you look at the scoreboard of registration battles, in Eswatini, it's been 7 years in the organization that I was speaking about having started. In Malawi, it has been 10 years for an organization called Nyasa Rainbow Alliance. And here in Mozambique, I'm aware of Lambda, but I also learned recently that there is also Pereira, who is also fighting this battle of registration. But funny enough, we are realizing that organizations are now having to change their objectives just because they need that legitimacy. But these are some of the problems that, you know, we are talking about. And I think Southern Africa has taught us, in fact, has taught the continent how to win in court. But now from here in this place, here in Maputo, we must teach the continent how to turn judgments into action and economic opportunities. Because these rulings cannot just remain in the clerks or the judges' chambers. They must not just remain with our lawyers. These judgments must become actionable. We must push for implementation. So the question is, how do we get to that point? And here is what gives me hope, really. And I've learned this in detail from the Alliance itself, because yesterday we had a wonderful discussion where we were discussing about what they're doing here in Maputo, broadly here in Mozambique. And I think Inclusia, Porella, Kupinja, Maningi, Diversidade, and their sister organizations are really doing amazing in terms of working with queer entrepreneurs, you know, for public programs, working with Young Creative Awards, working with the Municipal Fund right now, and a seat in the Employment Policy Working Group. And an invitation actually to the Ministry of Labor, to the Ministry of Labor's own social protection forum. And also their dreams and hope to expand to Eswatini, to Botswana, to Lesotho, and across the region. This speaks to the dream that we hold. This speaks to the resilience that we hold as LGBTQ people. And to me, at the very least, it speaks to the power that we have to make sure that all of these beautiful case laws that we've created, the jurisprudence that exists, can be put to action only if we work together. So, we must name the moment now. This playbook is spreading because it is funded, and I think we've spoken about the amount of money that we're losing. But there's also a huge amount of money that is going into these anti-rights people. If you look at the numbers, at least from those who are doing the research, they're saying about $3.7 billion have flown into the anti-gender movements worldwide in just 5 years. Think about that. 3.7 billion US dollars that we are fighting against. And in just 2023 and 2024, 3 of these anti-LGBT organizations had a combined income of about a billion US dollars. Now look at these 3 organizations versus the over 7,700, or in fact even closer to 8,000 LGBT organizations that exist in the world. We are all fighting against a heavy machinery. But if you look at the numbers, there's more of us and less of them. But where is the money going? The money is going to them. And it arrives, and all of these conversations are happening while there's the whole sovereignty and African values conversation. I think Teboho was talking about this earlier in the morning. And we need to be clear that these laws that are influencing this sovereignty conversation in Accra, these family values conversations, are not issues that were actually written here in Maputo or in Lusaka or in Babane or in Pretoria or in Lilongwe or in any other capital in Africa. These were laws that were written in England. These were laws that were written during the Victorian era. I mean, a good friend of mine tells me a story of how actually Queen Victoria allowed for the criminalization of same-sex intimacy across the Commonwealth. Because apparently some of her priests were traveling in India and they were shocked to Indians were so liberal, and then they wrote back to the Queen, and then the Queen talked to the Archbishop, and then they all agreed, no, we can't allow this innocent. If you read about Orientalism, you will know exactly how significant this story is, to talking about the fact that the only thing that we've inherited from our colonial masters is the criminalization of our bodies. But in terms of wrapping it up, what do I bring as a representative of the Southern Africa Litigation Center? I think 21 years of strategic litigation for us has taught us one method, that we will never litigate alone. We will never go to court alone. Every case that I've mentioned was born in a community, and we litigated as a movement, not standing alone. So we offer 4 things that I've come to offer here in Maputo, which is litigation, direct representation, and support to local lawyers. We are at your disposal. Speak to us. We are willing to work with you. We're also offering regional mechanisms, the African Commission. We have what is it called? The status at the African Commission. So we are able to address them. So reach out to us if there are issues that you want elevated at that level. We also do a lot of research. We do a lot of policy briefs. And yesterday when we were speaking about the issue of legal gender recognition, I realized that in our stream of LGBTQ work, we hadn't thought of Mozambique because we have a policy brief for Botswana, for Eswatini and Lesotho. But this is an opportunity for us to continue to work together. And one more thing which I can only whisper today is that the whole issue of sovereignty laws, which we have seen recently in Uganda, we are definitely going to be challenging that, and you can watch the space. And my message is simple. There is no inclusive social protection without legal recognition. They are organized and funded, but so are we. We have the constitutions, we have the African Charter, but most importantly, we have one another. Kanimambo.